Have you ever wondered why you're not farming with a wooden plow right now, or why most of us live in cities instead of tiny villages? The answer, in large part, is a world-changing event that kicked off just a few hundred years ago: the Industrial Revolution. It wasn't a war with generals and battles, but it completely reshaped our planet, our societies, and the very way we live our daily lives. So grab a cup of tea, which by the way became popular during this era, and let's journey back to 18th century Britain, where it all began. Before the mid-1700s, life for most people had been pretty much the same for centuries. The vast majority lived in rural areas, working the land. Everything was made by hand, from the clothes on their backs to the tools they used. This was the cottage industry era. Imagine a family gathered in their small home, spinning wool into yarn and weaving it into cloth. It was slow, painstaking work, and production was limited. Life was dictated by the seasons, not by the clock. So what lit the fuse for this massive explosion of change? It was a perfect storm of factors brewing in Great Britain. The country had abundant natural resources, especially coal and iron ore, the essential building blocks of industry. It also had a stable government that encouraged business and a growing colonial empire that provided both raw materials and a ready market for finished goods. Plus, a series of agricultural improvements, known as the Agricultural Revolution, meant more food could be produced with fewer workers, freeing up people to move to cities and work in new industries. The first industry to be truly transformed was textiles, the making of cloth. For centuries, people had spun thread by hand using a spinning wheel. It was a bottleneck. It took several spinners to supply one weaver with enough thread. Then, in the 1760s, inventors like James Hargreaves with his spinning jenny and later Richard Arkwright with his water frame created machines that could spin multiple threads at once. These machines were too large and expensive for a cottage. They needed a dedicated space and a power source. This led to the birth of the factory. But the real game changer, the engine that powered the entire revolution, was the steam engine. While early versions existed, it was James Watt's improved design in the 1770s that made steam power efficient and practical. Initially used to pump water out of coal mines, allowing miners to dig deeper, the steam engine was soon adapted to power machinery and factories. Now, you didn't need to be near a fast-flowing river to have a mill. You could build a factory anywhere, as long as you could get coal to it. And this is where things really started to accelerate. With steam-powered machines churning out textiles at an incredible rate, the factory system took over. Huge brick buildings, belching smoke from their chimneys, began to dominate the landscape. Instead of working at their own pace at home, people now worked in factories for a set number of hours, performing a single, repetitive task over and over. The rhythm of life shifted from the sun and seasons to the factory whistle and the relentless pace of the machine. This new way of working created a massive demand for labor, pulling people from the countryside into rapidly growing urban centers. Cities like Manchester and Liverpool exploded in size, becoming the world's first industrial cities. But this growth was chaotic and unplanned. People were crammed into poorly built, overcrowded housing with little to no sanitation. Diseases spread like wildfire in these unsanitary conditions. The air was thick with coal smoke, and the rivers were often polluted with industrial waste. For many, the dream of a better life in the city turned into a grim reality of long hours, low wages, and dangerous working conditions. Life in the factories was tough. A typical workday could be 12 to 16 hours long, 6 days a week. The work was monotonous and often incredibly dangerous. Machines had no safety guards, and accidents were common. Even children, some as young as 5 or 6, were employed in factories and mines, chosen for their small size, which allowed them to crawl under machinery or into narrow coal seams. They worked the same long hours as adults for a fraction of the pay. Of course, not everyone suffered. A new social class emerged: the industrial capitalists. These were the factory owners, the inventors, and the investors who built and financed this new industrial world. They amassed immense fortunes and lived in luxury, often in stark contrast to the poverty of their workers. This created a huge gap between the rich and the poor, leading to social tensions and the rise of new political ideas. Thinkers like Karl Marx looked at this system and developed theories about class struggle that would influence the course of history for the next century and beyond. The revolution wasn't just about factories and cities, it also transformed transportation. The need to move massive quantities of raw materials like coal and cotton, and finished goods like cloth, spurred incredible innovations. First came a network of canals, which were like man-made rivers for transporting heavy goods on barges. Then, the real breakthrough, the steam locomotive. George Stephenson's rocket, developed in 1829, proved that steam power could be used for land transport. The age of the railway had begun. Railways stitched the country together like never before. They could move goods and people faster and cheaper than ever imagined. Fresh food from the countryside could reach the cities, and people could travel for work or leisure. The railroad shrunk the world, creating a sense of national unity and enabling further industrial expansion. From Britain, the Industrial Revolution spread, first to other parts of Europe, like Belgium, France, and Germany, and then across the Atlantic to the United States. Each country adapted the revolution to its own resources and circumstances, but the core principles remained the same: mechanization, factory production, and urbanization. In America, inventors like Eli Whitney, with his cotton gin and his concept of interchangeable parts, accelerated industrial growth, particularly in the northern states. The impact of the Industrial Revolution is almost impossible to overstate. It created the modern world. It led to an explosion in the production of goods, raising the overall standard of living for many over the long term. It fueled scientific and technological innovation that continues to this day. We have cars, electricity, computers, and smartphones all because of the chain of innovation that started in those first British factories. But it also came at a great human cost. The exploitation of workers, the grim living conditions, and the environmental damage were the dark side of progress. It took decades of struggle, with workers forming unions and demanding better rights, for conditions to slowly improve. Laws were eventually passed to limit working hours, ban child labor, and improve safety and sanitation. So, when you look around at our world today, the skyscrapers, the highways, the device you're watching this on, remember that it's all built on a foundation laid during the Industrial Revolution. It was a period of incredible genius and creativity, but also of great hardship and struggle. It forever changed the relationship between humans and their work, between people and the environment, and it set us on the path to the complex, interconnected, technological world we live in now. It truly was the revolution that made the modern world. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this journey into the past interesting, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into history. Let me know in the comments what part of the Industrial Revolution you find most fascinating. See you next time.